special town meeting. Last night, the Board of Selectmen voted to approve and attach a special town meeting calendar, which sets a STA date on Tuesday, October 21st, 2014. The Board also opens the warrant and plans to close it at their next meeting on the 15th. If you have a warrant article, but would be wording, if you have a warrant article, but the wording is not final, please let me know, so a placeholder can be indicated when the board closes the warrant. Is this something we're going to do when we look for the zoning changes? Put it on that warrant?
Yes, this is the warrant. So at the last meeting, you had already directed me to put the miniature golf par 3 one on. And Cheryl McKissick submitted hers on her own already.
Okay.
And tonight I wanted to tell Mike Loyne about the Burton Engineering on a conservation easement for the black cherry tree that's going to the town. And then when Cleve Lair shows up, I wanted to just let him know that it's scheduled because he's putting in for street acceptance for his subdivision project.
Right.
And those are the only ones we have.
We got a site visit report from Graves Engineering. This is for the Revo Rabbit facility. Upon arriving, I met with Clint, who reviewed the work completed to date. This is the first request for site inspections. The subgrading inspection today appears to be firm and free of organic and other deteriorating material. The building pad and the parking area have also been cut and filled to subgrade elevation. Both stormwater basins near New Spencer Road and the buildings have been graded and loom was being spread in the lower basins. This is the current schedule for EGI. We'll perform our next inspection next week. He's got some pictures here that you might want to review to go along with his correspondence. We also have another from Graves Engineering for Revo. Please find the enclosed copy of the Yankee Engineering and Testing Report for the roadway gravel base material. We have reviewed the report and find that the gravel is acceptable as it meets the specifications. Gravel, Mass DOT specifications, M1.03.0.B. Protective test has been performed for compacting testing yielding a value of 139.9. If you can read this report, you can look at it. Casello, mark your calendar. Hazardous Waste Day, Collection Day, Saturday, September 27, 2014, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Casello Waste Facility at 165 Barefoot Road across from the landfill. I'm assuming this is something they do every year.
Yes.
For the town for hazardous waste households. It's going to be an all-board department, commission, committee meeting, Tuesday, September 23rd, 2014, at 6:30 p.m. Charlton Town Hall, Senior Center. Please RSVP, Mary Devlin at the administrative assistant. This is that roundtable meeting that Robin has.
This is the one that is scheduled twice a year, every 6 months.
Yep.
And usually the planning board chairman, if you're not available, someone else would give a general overview. I provide you with some meeting notes to utilize.
The Oxford Planning Board public hearing. Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Monday, September 8th, 2014, on application for a special permit and site plan review submitted by BWC 5 Mile River LLC. The applicant proposed to install a 1.7 MWAC ground-mounted solar array consisting of approximately 7,100 solar modulars and associated equipment. parcel on which the proposed installation rests is owned by Lee Kelly, as shown on Assessor Map 11, parcel B07, and located at 45 Flat Mountain Road in the R2 subdivision residential zoning district. Check that one out. There's another one for the zoning board of appeals for the town of Oxford. Address is 187 Sutton Ave. To request a special permit to change the use of a pre-existing non-conforming use to existing non-conforming use for a proposed office and showroom for a kitchen cabinet business in an existing building. Action was taken and the permit was granted. Town of Sturbridge Planning Board has a public hearing. Town of Sturbridge will hold a public hearing on Tuesday, September 23rd, 2014, on an application of a Town of Sturbridge Recreational Department. The applicant is requesting a site plan approval to construct 1 soccer field, 1 baseball field, 2 basketball courts, 2 bocce courts, a children's playground, concession stand, with portable restroom area, and related site improvement property location is 69 Route 84. And I have a letter here for the chairman, the planning board. It is my understanding that the alternate seat on the board is currently vacant. I am interested in filling the position that would ask that the board consider me for the position. Please let me know if the board requires an additional information as part of this request. This is Carl Hoffman. He's sent us a letter asking if we'd like to fill the position for the alternate seat. And what I'd like to do is just go over this briefly and see if this is something we'd like to entertain, and ask him to come in for the meeting and discuss it with him.
Sounds good.
Absolutely.
So,
Would you want me to do what you've done in the past when you're looking to fill it or someone comes forward, ask Mary Devlin to post the notice, and that way if there's anybody else or just him, after you interview him or anybody else, you can move forward and schedule a joint appointment with the select board?
Sounds good.
Is this a
Yep.
good time to?
all right,
Sure, if you'd
So
like to.
we'll have Alan do that. Supposedly we Mary to see if anybody else is interested in filling the alternate seat.
Perfect.
And if we get some applications, we can review them at one of our meetings. Review this.
Sounds good.
Do you have a public hearing at 7:15, a little bit before that? Is there any quick item you'd like to review, or do you want to?
We could do an A&R, or
Yep.
we got an A&R that came in the other day, or we could do a couple permit administrative items, whichever works.
Something that would just take up probably 5-10 minutes.
Why don't we do the A&R? That'd be great. Thank you. This A&R was submitted by Burton Engineering on behalf of Pat Nyland. If you recall, her husband Ken Nyland, who passed away, would come before the board occasionally doing various development on a lot of land they own along Cranberry Meadow Drive and North Sturbridge Road. What this A&R does is actually very simple when you look at it. It's very large scale. Right now, this is all one large parcel. She's splitting it into 3. She's keeping the east and west pieces in her name, 27 acres here and 14 here. She's selling the middle piece that's labeled Lot 9, which is about 15.29 acres, to a gentleman who lives in the neighborhood, Jeff Richardson. And Jeff he's told Kurt Meskis and myself, he'd like to look into the possibility of starting to use the old building that Ken used to use back there for machinery that Ken used. He's looking into the idea of maybe, he's not sure exactly what yet, maybe something with automobile service and all. We told him that he can go to the zoning board of appeals to pursue that for a special permit to alter, extend, or change a pre-existing non-conformity. And he'll probably do that in the long run. But for now, all this does is create the lot and allow the transfer of the property. It looks narrow, but it's not. It's the scale. It's 15 acres. This is not narrow at all. There's 200 feet of frontage. There's at least 100 plus feet at that narrow area, and then it flares back out. The heritage black cherry tree that we have in town is actually located right here. And I met with Jeff and spoke at length with Mrs. Nyland. She would really like it preserved in Ken's memory. It's an emotional item. It means a lot to her, and it meant a lot to Ken, and Jeff is fine with that. So what they're proposing is they'd like to create a conservation easement from the street here and around the tree, and they'd like to come forward for the fall town meeting and request the town to accept the conservation easement. I've spoken with Todd, the conservation agent, and he's very interested in receiving the responsibility if the town accepts the easement, taking care of the tree for the remainder of its life. And it's not a public access easement, it's an easement that would allow town employees or board members who would go in and treat the tree or take care of it type of thing. So the A&R itself doesn't create the easement, it just lays it out for information purposes. A lawyer will create the easement with a deed and include that in the transfer between them. And then if town meeting approves accepting the easement, then town council and the lawyer for Mr. Richardson or Mrs. Nyland would just do the conveyance at the registry. So it is a routine A&R in terms of what A&Rs are all about. I recommend approval.
Is that North Sturbridge down toward you, right there?
North Sturbridge is here.
And the house is actually across the street on the, there,
Here.
right,
Ken's garage is here, and then Ken had another garage down the back.
right.
So she's trying to keep this as one piece, correct?
Yes.
And then she wants to keep this as another piece. She wants to sell this lot. This is presently owned by somebody already.
Yes.
So it's
And then this is Cranberry Meadow.
Cranberry Valley. This is where they put up the fairly new houses
Yeah.
over the last 5 or
Okay.
6 years.
Mhm.
On that road. Do I have a motion to accept the A&R plan as drawn with the condition of putting an easement in for the tree?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Jane Elton, Acres. He did something very wrong, so I'll let it go. Done with that. Start reading this because it'll take me that long. The Charlton Planning Board is holding a public hearing. In accordance with section 7.1.4, 7.2.1, and 7.2.7 of the Charlton zoning bylaws, the Charlton Planning Board will hold a public hearing on Wednesday, September 3rd, 2014, at 7:15 in the planning board office, George C. McKinley Building, 37 Main Street, Charlton, Mass. On the site plan approval application of Waterman Design Associations Incorporated, 31 East Main Street, Westboro, Mass. 01581 on behalf of East End LLC and Nexip Incorporated, requesting approval to amend a previous approval site plan to install and operate a commercial ground solar mount array on approximately 25 acres of a 35.9 acre site location at 9 Carpenter Hill Road, assessor map 34, Block A, Parcel 3. Said property is zoned low-density residential, R40. Said property site plan revision consists of relocating and planning construction stagings areas from abutting property onto the site, redesign of the site access driveway to accommodate deliveries, usage during the construction phase of revised stormwater management site grade. Copies of the plan application are available for inspections at the planning board office and the town clerk's office during regular business hours. Any person wishing to be heard should appear at the time of the public hearing. Alan, would you like to give us
Sure.
a little overlay of it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll give a quick overview and then introduce the applicant, and they can give their presentation. To refresh everyone's memory, last year, GeoPeak Energy of New Jersey originally submitted and received approval to put in a solar array. And then they reapplied this past January for a revision. That revision shrunk the size of it as they shifted over to a different type of solar panel. They went from a layout that they didn't need a 2-acre area, so they shrunk it by 2 acres. They adjusted some drainage, they adjusted a little of the layout. Nexamp of Massachusetts, and I'll introduce them in a moment, recently purchased the property and the project and submitted this revision, and as the chairman read in the public hearing notice, the goal of the revision is a couple of things. The Kozowski property next door was going to be a staging area, and everyone was led to believe the past year from the applicant to us that it was under Chapter 61. It's actually under an APR restriction, which is very permanent, and there's no way to deal with that, so the applicant is proposing putting the staging area back on their own property, the driveway design and some adjusting of drainage to go along with that. So with that, Mike Scott and the applicants are here. Any of you can introduce yourselves, from the CEO, Mr. Pantano, but when you do a presentation, if you can start with a general 5-minute overview presentation, but I'll turn it over to you if you want to say hello to the board, and then you can have your people present as you wish.
Hi, I'm Rob Pantano, and although I appreciate the field promotion from Alan, I'm actually the CFO and COO of Nexamp of Mass
The
Company.
acronym is confusing.
No, it's okay, thank you. And I'm on the board of directors as well. We're a mass-grown company. We're the largest individual mass-grown commercial solar designer, developer, and installer in the state. And we appreciate your time, and we appreciate everyone else's time as well. I've tried to reach out to as many abutters as I could in the process to just introduce ourselves. Sean Harrington is going to be building the project. Sean will introduce himself. Alan Clapp is also involved in the project from the development side, and of course Mike Scott from Waterman Designs. So we really appreciate you very much.
I'd like to give a 5-minute or so overview. Thank you.
As we set them up here, it's been fairly successful. Hopefully that works again. What I have are 2 plans. I'll show this first. These are the same plans or the same view of the proposal that we've shown each time. As Alan indicated, we were originally here last summer, almost a year ago, with GeoPeak Energy out of New Jersey. Some of the board members were here, some were not. We came back in April and revised the design to reduce the extent of the array, both footprint-wise and also to compress the location of the panels. Subsequent to that approval, within about a month or so, GeoPeak informed us that they would not be pursuing the project in its entirety this year, and we're going to scale it back to about half the size. Within a few weeks after that, we had a call from Nexamp, who, as Alan indicated, purchased the project from GeoPeak and asked us to work with them to further revise the array, to utilize the components that they are familiar with and that they install elsewhere in Massachusetts. And as Alan indicated, the access point, which from day one had been, at least from a construction standpoint, had been through the southern end of the site, right in this area, through the Kozowski's land, could no longer be utilized, which meant we needed to move the entrance for all access, both during construction and permanent, to the northern end of the site where they have frontage on Carpenter Hill Road. So the perimeter of the property is actually the bold black line is about almost 36 acres. site is almost entirely wooded today. What you're looking at is in the darker green and then the white, that would be the limit of the fenced area in which the solar panels would sit and their electrical equipment, which would then be connected underground out to approximately this point, at which point the power would be brought overhead through a series of poles and electrical components, equipment, out to Carpenter Hill Road, passing over Carpenter Hill Road. So essentially it's the same plant you've seen before. It's, as Alan indicated, when we came back in April, the array was shrunk about 2 acres. That remains. They don't intend to utilize about the northern acre and a half, 2 acres of the property for the array itself. Two things do happen. We do show it as cleared. When they lost the ability to utilize the several acre piece down in the Kozowski's land, they needed a staging area that that allowed them to clear it and do the minor grading necessary to bring the equipment in and drop the parts. So that's shown as to be cleared, but this green area outside the dark green, as before, that would be cut but not stumped and allowed to essentially reforest over the course of the life of the project, some 30 years or so. Anything inside the fences before would be cleared, graded as necessary, and I have a grading plan which I can show next, and then seeded with white clover and be allowed to green up. As with the design that GOP consented to install, they're going to auger posts or drive posts into the ground, and each, as with the April design, each of the modules has really been custom designed to fit the spot on the site where it's going. So it's not a cookie cutter approach. I think the original plan that we did for GeoPeak was sort of a just grade the site, make it uniformly flat. Mass earthwork was involved. It allowed them to install sort of a typical system, and it was in theory going to be quick. There was a lot of earthwork. They asked us to revise that plan in April when we did the plan for Nexamp this summer. We're sort of in between the two preceding plans. There's areas on site that would be graded, so I'll put this up. This actually shows the same area. The red is the property boundary, and the dark lines that you see running left and right are areas that would be graded. In other words, the ground form will be reshaped to be about a 6-to-1 slope, which is meaning 1 foot down for each 6 foot you go out. To put that in perspective, the side of mass highways that you see where there are big earth cuts, that's about a 3-to-1 slope. Any place that there's flatter than 4-to-1 along a road, you don't need a guardrail. So this would be a road shoulder that would be acceptable on any mass highway without a guardrail. So it's flat. It's easily maintainable, although they don't need to do any maintenance out here, other than occasionally inspect the site for any tree fall that's on the perimeter, any new growth, any woody species that need to be cut down. But again, the site would be essentially left as it is. And as before, the drainage system, the stormwater management, is comprised of three, what we have referred to in the past as small berms or side hill berms. Water runs down the hill in the same direction it does today, either towards Carpenter Hill or off towards Gillespie or towards the south towards the Kozowski's lands towards an intermittent channel, or to the north through an intermittent stream that runs off site towards Route 20. And in each of the prior designs, a series of small berms were utilized, no more than a foot tall. The idea being that if we intercept and infiltrate the water as it runs down the slope, it will mitigate and match what's going on today. And so we use the same approach this time. And as Alan indicated, all access is through the front, as I mentioned earlier. We did have to revise the site driveway. It's a little wider and it's a little flatter than we originally had, and that's to allow the construction vehicles entering it. If you've been by there in the last few days, they've started work. The site entrance is in. It's very flat. It's 2%. It's essentially a handicap accessible area. That's how flat they made it. And then it slopes up, but it allows them to get their construction vehicles in and out. So in the end, that's a significant reduction in traffic up and down Carpenter Hill Road, because everybody will be utilizing this both in the immediate and then in the future. The other features that we included in the earlier design: there's a fenced perimeter. There is a gate at the southern end, so they need to get outside it. There's a gate at the northern end that allows you into the fence perimeter. Abutters had requested that there be a leaf gate and boulders to prevent it from becoming a party spot in essence. That's been retained, but it's far enough from the road that it'll allow a truck in, so the truck doesn't have to stop on Carpenter Hill Road. There's really nothing else. There's no hard surfaces other than the pads on which the electrical equipment will sit. The road is to be crushed stone and gravel up and exposed gravel up to the fence. Within that, it's called out to be loamed over so that it will just appear like the rest of the site. So I think with that, I'll let Nexamp or Alan go forward.
Stand out to the board, 2 in this direction, and 5 in this direction. We have the peer review report from Graves, and again, to refresh everyone's memory, Mike Andrade, the civil engineer at Graves Engineering, is your peer review consultant, and it's very brief. He's essentially saying, and I won't quote anything because it's just, I can just paraphrase it, that the driveway design that Mike just presented is very suitable and properly designed. The stormwater management essentially system remains the same as it is, and he has no recommendations to change anything. And also, he notes just that, you know, you've moved the staging area. The only item there is, and I'll let you if you want to make the first initial comment, he did catch that there is, in most places, the perimeter fence is in the same location or further from abutting properties than previously approved, with one exception. And we've had a discussion on the phone and yesterday and today about that one exception. Do you guys want to bring that up and give us some thoughts of how you want to handle that? It's the item regarding right behind the Dobie property. Mr. Dobie is here, Bruce? Yeah, right. Did you have a chance to contact him? I know you were trying to.
I didn't have a phone number.
No, we saw you though. You came to our house.
Oh, yes, right, we
But
met.
I don't know what you're referring to.
I had a.
I could summarize it then. When
So,
we got the
sure.
peer review report 2 days ago, I suggested he contact you, and he tried. Apparently, he couldn't get a hold of you
I
via
had a
phone. And
2248 phone number.
Yep.
So I apologize.
Yep.
And John tried to come by today as well.
yeah, I'll read the statement. Additionally, in many areas, the perimeter fence is in the same location or further from abutting properties than previously approved. The exception is behind the Goby property, where the perimeter fence and solar panels just beyond it is about 54 feet closer to the property line, about 56 feet from the line. Vegetative screening remains as approved. And if you can pass this back to them. So I spoke with our engineer and said, and he confirmed, I said, are you saying that prior to this revision, the previously approved plan, the perimeter fence is about 110 feet behind your property? And now they've adjusted their panel layout and fence, and it now comes about 50 feet closer. And he said yes, and I suggested they speak to you about that, because it is something that A, wasn't approved without your knowledge, and is being proposed tonight. I'll be frank that I'm not comfortable recommending something like that unless the person being affected has a chance to talk about it this evening and see how they feel about that. So I explained to the applicant and the engineer that we'd bring it up tonight and we'd be part of the discussion, and I'm glad that you're here for that. So.
Yeah, Alan, I would say that Mike Andrade only reviewed the, or was comparing this plan to the April plan. Because after we had a call, I went back and looked at the August plan. The August plan was, and by that I mean August of 2013. It was still the fence perimeter and the location of the panels were a little farther uphill from the Carpenter Hill side, and in particular behind the Goby's property. But not anywhere near 110 feet. It was closer to what's on the current plan. That said, we didn't have to revise the location of the screen plantings or the screening plantings. The arborvitaes haven't been relocated along their property. They were actually relocated a little bit as we go farther north, but along that stretch of Carpenter Hill Road where through this area here we haven't revised the location of it. So what we've done is, if anything, the fence has come a little farther west.
So the landscaping behind their house isn't changing in terms of that row, but the fence is coming closer.
Yeah, the limit
It's
of
on the
clearing.
other side of the landscape.
The limit of clearing didn't change. The location of the arborvitae didn't change. The limit of grading hasn't changed. It's just that the fence and the array have come down a little farther. to
And what's the purpose for that? Why are you proposing that revision?
Well, I have to defer.
It was to put the access road in that's going along that top line all the way in. In the original plan, the access road only went up to the beginning of the array, which would have been very problematic to service the array and could potentially present a safety issue. And it was in our judgment that we felt that that needed to have as complete access as possible.
So that move along, and now I see it on the plan, does probably push everything about 30 to 40 feet to the west.
So you're saying that Mike is wrong on the measurements? He's saying
No,
that-
compared to the April plan, he's accurate, but compared to the original plan that was approved, I actually brought all the plans, but I did some measurements, after we spoke, and the original plan had the fence at about 70 feet and the array at about 90, so it's certainly closer, but it's not, twice, it didn't cut the distance in half. No, he's correct with respect to the April plan. And neither of those plans had the driveway continuing around the perimeter like that. There was a short driveway that ran up the middle, if you recall. So that's really the, because that explains it in many respects.
Well,
So you're
can I
saying
say
that-
something, or?
So you're saying the chain link fence is staying where it's been for the original plans?
No, it's a little closer.
Yeah,
It's
a little
closer to the arborvitae. It's a little closer.
The clearing didn't change.
The clearing didn't change, the grading didn't change. That's correct.
And the arborvitae is still going in?
That's
But the
correct.
array is quite a bit closer, is that what you're saying?
The array is on this plan, it's about, the panels are about 75 feet. They were originally about 87 feet. It's about 12 feet closer. At its closest.
And kind of pointed in the direction of our house, correct?
They actually face, the original array was actually angled more towards, it was more parallel to the Carpenter Hill Road. This actually is facing away from you. Each iteration of the plan, and I have the other ones, you can see it actually turns to be more true north-south. Interesting.
I mean, my comment about that is we had concerns already about how close this was coming to us, and now you're telling me it's even closer?
It's
I'm
about
not
12
happy
feet,
about
about
that.
12 feet closer than yours.
No, I'm not happy about that. And I thought we had talked about a mixed border, not just arborvitae. I thought that was what I had heard a few different times, was there would be a mixed, greenery border, and now I'm hearing we're just gonna have arborvitae, which is gonna look like a green freaking wall. So now we've got it closer to us, and it's gonna be more visible, and we don't have any border. We lost that argument a long time ago, and now you're telling me it's even closer.
I'm going to agree and
That's not
disagree with Mrs. Goby politely. I'm disagreeing with her in terms of the design of the landscaping. She's correct that GeoPeak originally proposed a mix, you're right. But the planning board explained that from our experience with arborvitae, in terms of actual visual blocking, the planning board required the mix to change to the arborvitae.
Okay.
I sympathize very much, and I was frank with the applicant, about a reaction that I expected from the Gobys of being concerned about it getting closer. I asked Mike Andrade, frankly, I said, as a non-engineer, speaking to our civil engineer, if the applicant didn't come any closer and wanted the same amount of panels and move them to a different side, such as where Alicia is pointing, is that creating any problem in terms of having to adjust stormwater management? And Michael said, no, you could just put the panels that are being proposed to be closer, not approve them to come closer, and put them on one of the other sides or one of the other rows. It's very simple. So you could approve it, subject to not encroaching further and closer to the Goby's property line. It's not it's not a complicated problem to make that adjustment from an engineering point of view. And I fully sympathize with the abutter's comments. I mean, it's very difficult to accept
This way?
coming closer.
I won't speak to I'd like to speak not to the design of the array, because that's not what we do there. The electrical engineering behind that's an entirely different science than what I'm involved in. But I know that there's a reason that everything is on that plan, meaning all the components are on that plan. From a site design perspective, there are other locations on the site in which those panels can go.
Right.
We couldn't adjust the whole array to the east because you can see the slopes starts to fall off. So we've utilized the flat portion of the site, and the eastern perimeter, the southern perimeter, and the northern perimeter are all effectively, the same. Actually, the southern perimeter is a little farther north than it had originally been, and that's, don't know what the logic there was, but what I will say is it's farther from the wetlands, it's farther from the environmentally protected portion of the site, all of which is a good thing. There's always the shading concern, so being slightly farther north is helpful there too. So, but I don't believe that, from what I've gathered from discussing solar siting with any number of companies, that it's quite as simple as picking up the modules and relocating. There are certain amounts of panels that are connected to certain electrical equipment. There's a whole circuitry matter to be taken care of. So it is certainly feasible, but to suggest that it's necessarily simple is, I think, a little unfair to that.
Well, I think feasibility is the key. The project was approved originally, was revised, and in both of those cases, it didn't come close to the property, and it's a huge site. I think if the folks are bringing up this as a serious concern tonight, as a staffer, I just respect that very much. And I have no problem about the fence being adjusted closer or farther. The fence is just a barrier. But what people are concerned about is the actual operating equipment getting closer, the panels themselves. I just think it's doable if the folks are requesting, as I'm hearing, that they're not looking for that piece of it. And it wasn't part of the major goal of the submittal anyway. The stated revision goals were revising the driveway, getting on the staging area, and adjusting some drainage accordingly. And there was no duplicity here. It was just part of their routine adjusting things as they worked on those items. This came along with it. But as Michael pointed it out, I thought it was fair, obviously, to let the abutters know, and Mrs. Goby is stating her concern this evening for the board's consideration. I think it has to be taken under advisement.
I think my other comment is that, overall, I was surprised that there are so few concessions to homeowners by the people coming in with such a large business. And such a huge change. I don't know, have any of you been there? Have any of you seen the change have any of you planning board members?
Well, I drove down Coxsville Road over the weekend.
But it's such a huge change. For us and for the future of the town. And we've just failed in almost any of the concessions from us.
Soft clearance, driveway. I'd like to keep that train of thought for a moment, and I was just wondering if there's any other concerns that somebody else is having. State your name and your
Bobby Eager. Bobby. On the drainage, where's the water gonna go now? Originally, where it wasn't supposed to go with the pool or something?
No, it's the same design we've had all along. As I described, the hill runs up from Carpenter Hill to this location, and then the terrain, stormwater runs off, snowmelt runs off to the east. So we have a series of 3 small berms, and the design allows the water to hit the first one. Some is infiltrated. Anything that's not infiltrated overtops, reaches the second, reaches the third. Because there's no grading changes along the bottom of the site, along the eastern end of the site, and these all run parallel to a contour, stormwater is going to continue to go as it does today.
Yeah, but there's gonna be more water.
No, it was designed to prevent that, as reviewed by, in this case, 2 separate engineering companies.
But on that, we're still seeing a sizable amount of cleared land. We'll have no trees absorbing or anything that will run down after that third berm. We're looking at quite a sizable amount of cleared property.
Well, yeah, the whole lot's going to be cleared on that side.
But there's nothing dealing
That's
with
right.
that
So the
additional water.
upper areas overcompensate to mitigate for what is below. That's correct. That's part of the design as well.
Another concern? Yes?
I'm Brenda Pepka. I live at 15 Carpenter Hill Road, right next to the driveway and the staging area. And I'd like to know a little bit more about the staging area. What's going to happen once this is all done? Is this going to be dressed up and cleaned up? It's a mess up there right now.
Yeah, the plan calls for it to be revegetated, similar to what the rest of the site would be.
Well, we never really heard about the staging area before because it was way up
Yeah, the original staging area was actually on the Kozlowski's
Right.
land, right, so this instance, as I described earlier, they've gotta cut the trees, which was originally gonna be
They
cleared.
pretty much done.
Right, which was on the.
Before we had this meeting. Could you show me
Sure.
exactly where that staging area is?
Yeah, it's right here.
supposed to be?
It's right in this area. Their home is here, and this is the area. And this is the area that the original plan that's approved from August last year had array. And
But
then-
it did not have a staging area, which
That's-
is
that's
quite a
correct.
bit different from.
Well, the staging
LA.
area is used for the period of construction, which is how long?
About 4 months.
So you have 4 months of activity, and then they're out of there.
The staging area is basically right next to her house.
It's right in back of my
There's no,
house.
there's no distance. I don't know if any of you guys
I've
on
seen
the
it.
planning board, the nice little red line, that's not what they have.
Well, that's
It's
the
like-
property line. So the clearing limit goes to the property line. There's a small man-made pond here. I haven't seen if the erosion control barrier was put in. I know we staked it.
It was.
So you're talking from the home, you know, the better, somewhere around 200 feet, 180 feet from the home is the staging area.
I think the question she's asking is, when it's all done, will it be seeded as?
Yeah, it would be
a field?
reseeded. It'd be reseeded as clover. It'd be let go. I mean, if there's a need, there shouldn't be a need long term for use.
This is just an example of two of our finished sites. And we can provide more if anyone would like, in different scenarios. But we plant, as I mentioned to you when we met, we plant material that is not gonna overgrow the array, but also is gonna take hold of the ground very quickly and then slowly be taken over by the clover, which is a slower growing process, which is why the mix we put in at first is a solar friendly mix that will immediately take hold and start to germinate.
Yeah. Question?
This is, you showed me an area. I want to see where the staging area is.
Well, again, they're utilizing this portion of the site. That's about an acre and a half. Your home is here.
It's, yeah.
That's about an acre and a half. There's a fairly steep slope here.
How far is that road for her back there?
Oh, from the road, that's a
her
different
house?
question. The road's probably about 40 to 50 feet from that.
In the house.
Correct.
And I wanna know what's gonna happen at the end of this.
It'll, as he says, it'll all be revegetated in for, some type of clover / some type of grass. So
So
it'll
is,
go back to
they,
a meadow.
right now, they've got it all,
De-stumped and
yeah,
flat
they,
for
yeah,
their
and
equipment use.
like some, I don't even know, cause I wasn't home last week.
Yeah.
Some kind of dirt is up there. Is that gonna be like covered up? What's the,
Yes, it's gonna be regrown.
Yeah, that whole area will really reestablish being in the north. It'll likely be left to, completely revegetated with no reason for it to maintain it after this area. So we'll get it stabilized. It'll be, left to be, obviously it's a change from what it was, dramatic change.
yeah,
I
more
don't
than
argue,
dramatic.
I don't argue that.
The other question I have is, and this is probably nothing to do with the planning board, but this equipment and stuff that's up there, a guy's running a truck through there at 5 o'clock in the morning. What is that?
I don't believe we can answer that question.
I would speak to the building commissioner about when someone receives a building permit, what the town's regulations are in terms of hours of operation. I don't know if you can elaborate.
Yeah, we attempted 7 to 5 and no weekends. That was our goal, to not try to affect people in
Right,
the area.
7, it's 5 o'clock, the truck is running, and it moves down that road at 10 minutes past 5.
Well, we'll make sure to address that.
I would appreciate it.
Yep, I'm happy to do that.
We have one more question in the back.
Well, Pete Boria, half owner of the property. A couple points. When this project started with GeoPeak, I think we were dealing with a much different type of company than we're dealing with now. I think most of you have been tried to be talked to by Rob and from people from Nexamps. And they seem to be a lot more forthcoming, they seem to be a lot more approachable, they seem to be a lot more forthright in what they want to do, what their intent is, and how they plan to operate the facility when it's done. And secondly, I don't believe any of the clearing that they have done so far is above and beyond what was approved in the original approval. So the land that's cleared now is not different or has not changed, or will not change based on this submission or this request for a revision. So,
Well, I beg to differ,
Yes.
because clearing land is a little different from building a staging area, which they're doing.
I think in the original plan.
But we weren't told about it.
Wasn't there.
If I'm not mistaken, Mike, in the original plan, behind the Pepka's property, it was gonna be cleared as it is now to put panels there,
Yeah,
which
the
are no longer gonna be there.
Yeah,
That's
well, the
correct.
last meeting I came to, it was gonna end right where the pond is, which is what that picture shows right there.
Right, the original plan that were from August went all the way to the northern end. So the clearing limits are as shown all the way to the property line, which is a stone wall, almost the entire property. That northern area, that northern 2 acres or so was to be cleared and there were to be panels. We have the plan, it's the approved plan from August. When we came back in April with GOP, the project scaled back like to the location that you see it now. About an acre and a half came out, and it was gonna remain limited.
Right,
But the
so that
original-
was our understanding.
That was the last version, that's correct.
Until a week ago, week and a half ago. That was the understanding. I just don't know why we couldn't have been made more aware of it before it all started.
Well, and the road seems to be wider than the initial impression that we had.
I think you'll see that the land clearing that's been done was approved on the first, on the
That's
first
what changed.
plan approval. And now that it's being done, there's concern about
Yes,
Well,
the-
yeah,
the three-
nothing can be
was
done now
approved.
because it's already done.
Well,
But it
you're
was
right, because
all approved
the
originally.
clearing that was originally approved is still the clearing that's being proposed. What we're here for this evening is to consider three things. Redesign of the driveway design to allow the construction vehicles to go up and down during
They already
construction.
did it.
If I could please have the floor, ma'am. Second of all, approval of using that staging area during construction when you bring the panels in, storing them there and coming out of that staging area to install them. And a moderate amount of drainage adjustment that goes along with this as you create the staging area usage through tonight's revision request and the driveway finalization. And then we discovered, through the review, that one item about some of the panels getting closer, which also is part of tonight's hearing review. So everything that you see right now physically out there happening was part of the original approval in terms of activity for clearing and site prep. It's the same from the original version, the revision version, revision number 1, and tonight's proposed one. So it's not anything being done after the fact, it's all per all the steps that were already approved.
With the exception of the staging area being changed?
With the staging area being changed, yes, absolutely.
And
Which has
eventually
already been
that's-
done, and being used, is the point they're trying to make.
No, the staging area that they're requesting, they can clear it right now irregardless, which they plan on doing. They're looking for permission tonight when they deliver the panels to bring them in, put them there, and then start moving them over with their crews. They have to put the panels somewhere as they bring them in, deliver them, and start to create rows. Originally, they were gonna do it on the Kozowski property, but the Kozowskis didn't make it clear that there's an APR restriction that the state doesn't allow anyone to do anything. So now they just wanna do that, bring in the panels, stage them somewhere, and move them to create the rows on their own property. That's what's happening.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What?
say your names.
Judy Dowd, live at 27 Carpenter Hill Road. This morning there were tractor trailers going up there. What is that they're bringing up? That is not the staging, or?
They're actually taking out wood chips and logs.
In a
material.
tractor trailer?
Yeah, the
It did
wood-
look like a wood truck to remove it.
Yeah, so the
Looked
wood
like a
chips are-
tractor trailer.
Okay, so the wood chips actually are blown into the backs of full-body tractor trailers and they're used locally, I believe, for burning and a number of other things to generate. So it's just one of the byproducts. The logs that are usable as logs go out in a typical log truck, which maybe you're more familiar with,
That's
the
what,
bars.
what I mean, it didn't look like that
Yeah,
at
so
all,
there's been kind of a little bit of a mix of both, just depending on, so like all the material, the tops of the trees and the branches and the parts that don't necessarily have any value as lumber, now chips have made it's actually made logging a lot cleaner, and that has a value, so the loggers actually take the time to pick up everything and they chip it all
slipping up with the grades. It's something that has to be done, and, their plan is to address it on the finish and make it, not as conspicuous as it is today. The goal is to bring it back in.
Right, but they'll still need some room to get, if they do need a
There will always
large
be an
pickup or
access road
something,
going.
right. You have to have for vehicle traffic to go up there to,
The last one is the Gobi issue. I personally feel that I need to see the firm try to find a way to keep those panels on the original site, to the original plan. If the Gobis are closer.
no
to the
closer
fields.
than what the original
The
thing
original
said.
plan said.
If they need to add another row someplace else,
We'll give
like
them
you
the-
said,
they have
it's
the
like a
flexibility
change
to do
order, you
that.
come back and you just do that.
But should
So
there
that's
be a
just
meeting of a minds between the two engineers though? Because there seems to be a discrepancy between what Graves said and what this gentleman said about the previous
Well,
approved plan.
again, I don't agree with that. I mean, I feel very strongly that our engineer was confirming to me it's not triggering a drainage problem. And I think the site is just big enough that they can come back as a field adjustment to show those panels somewhere else, and the two engineers can talk about specifics and have a meeting of the minds and
Right,
bring it to board.
yes, that's what I meant.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
absolutely.
So it's that 12 feet to get to the original spot? Is that what we're talking about?
Not, from your last plan approval, behind the Gobi property, not adjusting the panel location any closer than it was previously approved. That's what we're talking about. But if the applicant wants to make up the panels that they were proposing to move closer, they can put them somewhere else on the property. And from our engineer, his engineer can look at their proposal for that and then bring it to the planning board as a field adjustment to put it somewhere else that isn't getting near any butters.
Just as long, right, just as long as we don't encroach on somebody else's
Exactly.
property.
There's
Okay.
plenty of room and other peripheral
Right.
perimeters of the large array.
Can I just ask a question? The engineer here notes that the fence itself is closer, but he or she doesn't say anything about the solar panels changing.
Excuse me, he does. In the second to last line, he says the perimeter fence and the solar panels beyond are closer.
Okay, I
And when I
apologize.
followed up
I
and spoke
missed
with
that.
him on the
Okay.
phone to clarify that, he said yes.
Okay,
The
I
panels are
apologize.
moving closer.
Discussion now?
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah, good other point.
we'll get the feedback from the two engineering firms and
Well, again, that is an after-the-fact approval. That's something they can come back if they choose. You're prohibiting that section from coming closer. If they want to make it up in the future somewhere else that's non-prohibitive, let them come back on that. But I'd recommend tonight approving the revision, subject to what's been submitted with that one condition of you modifying it, not coming closer on the panels, the Gobis. And second, a condition that all previous conditions from the previous approval stay in place, which is everything else you've listed that are routine processing for any project.
do you have a motion to accept that as,
So moved.
as just
Second.
said? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Passes?
We'll write up the decision the next few days and provide it to you, and we'll keep talking about that adjustment, and we can pull Mike Andrade into it to work and help in that respect.
Okay, thanks.
You're very welcome.
I appreciate everybody's support.
Thank you. Thank you for your participation.
Talk real quick. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all.
Have a good night.
There's a whole new group in the hall. There's a whole new group of people in the
No,
hall.
the engineers there, he's in the hall.
Oh,
I think he might even be a conservation.
But when I
Hey.
saw all the people there, I'm like, I don't recognize
Like
these
the
names.
They're not from your neighborhood.
Back.
Thank you for reminding that I used you as an example.
No, that's
Kind of the guys in the back. I don't know if you got
It's
his
true.
name.
It's true. I'm Mr. Waterman. Nice to see you again as always. Nice to see the board.
How you doing?
Other members of the board.
You're representing Mike Waterman? Yep, Jason is here. I don't know if you met this gentleman who's.
Mike Tomas.
Yep.
J. Du Bois. Hi. How you doing?
Maybe we don't have another mic.
Yeah, another
So many
mic.
mics.
So little time.
I can pick up where we were before. Sure. I'll pass around and maybe an extra one or two. If you'd like to pull up one of those chairs, Jason, it's up to you. You want to get up
Yeah,
to
I'll
the
do that.
table? And I can summarize where we are, and Jason can jump in. If you recall, we had two reports from Graves, the last version of the revisions to Phase 3 of Honican Hill Estates on reconstructing the road in a way that we're designing the drainage and such that addresses Mike's issues along with the road, which is all erosion sedimentation together. This is a report that Graves provided yesterday that basically says, in terms of the sidewalk, the road grading, the road stormwater management, and the noise barrier, we're good with the exception of a couple of small items. A CAD drafting issue of accurately showing some crushed stone hashing on a detail, accurately referring to measurements in the grading of a particular swale, and just a reference on a outlet pipe on drainage. Those are minor items that can be taken care of by Burton Engineering on a revision for information purposes. It's not really a redesign. It's very difficult. The main issue is we're still awaiting from Burton Engineering a plan that responds to the other memo that addressed Mike's erosion sedimentation from the hillside of the lot above him down. So we can't wrap up this evening. We're still awaiting that. I don't know if you brought it or you're just representing Mike to convey back what the board is saying this evening. I wasn't sure, Jason.
I didn't get this. This was just yesterday.
Yeah, we faxed it over to Mike. But,
Okay. I just want to see this.
I know you're filling in for your boss and you're in a
Yeah.
tough spot here.
I'm not sure what he's talking about. The one about the detail with the hatching. I thought it was, not that that's a big thing, but
Yeah.
the hatching is the same. I mean, it's,
So where we are is separate from Mr. DeMassi's property. Outside of his property within the public right-of-way, we're 98% done in that respect. But we're still waiting, Jason, for a response, a revision sheet in response to the other Graves report. And just to fill you in,
Yep.
the lot above him, the hillside, there's erosion sedimentation problems that have damaged his driveway and the foundation of his pool, and
Okay.
we just haven't received. Michael described at the last meeting how Burton Engineering was going to revise it on a plan and give it to us for review, and we just haven't gotten it yet.
okay.
That's
Yeah,
what I know.
I'm pretty sure that Mike's been working on that. I don't have anything for that right now with me. You have this house here, correct?
I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I can check with him first thing tomorrow and see where we are with that.
Sure. We have another meeting 2 weeks from now. I asked Mike Andrade if you got it in a normal time period prior to that meeting, could he review it? And he said absolutely.
Okay.
We can share it with Mike here too as it comes in.
Yep. All right.
So I'd say, we're 50% there in terms of just about done with everything in the right-of-way, but awaiting the other half, which is the
Yeah.
erosion sedimentation from lot to lot,
Okay.
so to speak.
All right, yeah, I'll check with him tomorrow and make sure we get that right over to Mike.
The plan that he has there does show the extension of the,
Noise
for the other
barrier.
lots, for their noise barriers, right?
Into lot 7.
Yes. Yeah, this was done on the last revision.
Okay.
The darker sections are the extension, right?
Yes, these are the new proposed grades to come out further.
And when we say the walkway sidewalk is done, we're referring to the sidewalk that's going to go
So you
onto
do
the
come
other
right up
side.
to the table to look at
Right.
the
You're referring to that, you're not referring to my discussion about the sidewalk in front of my house being damaged by water.
Right, that
Okay.
one is a given that they're definitely just gonna have to repair it and
Yeah,
reverse it,
okay,
absolutely, sure.
just to make sure I
Yeah,
understand
but
that.
that's on the list, absolutely. And I spoke with Mike Loyne since the last board meeting at the chairman's request regarding the basin at the bottom in the public area that's gotten clogged from this, and Mike assured us that, and told me to convey to the board tonight that Burton or a contractor from the bank will definitely clean that out and restore it so it's functioning.
So stormwater coming for the winter, it'd be nice to make sure it's operating.
That's the one down in the back here, probably.
No,
No.
it's actually a basin on the roadway below, or we've
Oh,
accepted
okay.
as a public way. All the
Okay.
runoff is just clogged in. Highway is concerned too.
It's silt is clogged
Yeah,
out.
it's way in. So the only other additional thing that I have to bring to the table today is that something I don't know if we've had discussion about. I'm just not that remember. I can't remember a lot of things, but in front of I can't remember my kids' names. All right. So anyway, there are a series of circular drain covers and a series of rectangular drain grids that when the road was originally repaired, because it was all damaged, they reset those and then they put a tarred layer over it, which was fantastic. We finally had a roadway that was great and didn't have holes. It was a fantastic thing. The water, and I believe that we're certainly addressing that and making great strides to preventing this from doing any more casualties, continued to flow underneath the roadway, including the repaired road. And there are, therefore, there are cases in front of my house where the, I'll pass that around, the drains are coming up like this, but the road's going like that, and it's cracking all around, and setting
yeah.
down. That's just one of them. There's approximately three squares and 3 circles that are all in that same condition. And I know that the road is now approved and owned by the town, but I'm pretty sure that the roadway continued to sink from the underneath water that was causing that to happen. Because after you pass Hannah's Way, you no longer see this kind of cracking and the drains are all firm and solid. But from Hannah's Way up to my world, they're all doing that.
This is in the public accepted section?
This is in the public
Yeah.
accepted section.
I'm not passing the buck, but you have to talk to Highway, and they do check the roads, and they're aware of it, whether it's a concern of theirs or not. I can't speak for them.
Okay.
But if it's public, once something's accepted, it's completely their jurisdiction, and we don't get involved.
Okay,
So
I just thought I'd bring it up.
Sure, but if you'd like to speak to Jerry Foskett about it and see if he's aware of it or not, I think that would be positive.
Okay, that's my only new piece of news.
If you want to make it for the next meeting, fine. If not, if it doesn't work for you guys, if you could just let us know so we could let Mike know either way.
Okay.
The meeting after that would be October 1st. So we're looking at September 17th, and then beyond that is October 1st.
September 17th and October
Yes, 1st.
1st?
Yeah.
Or our next meeting?
Yeah, so I can call you and let you know either way if they're on for the 17th, if they can make it for those further revisions. If they're delayed, then it makes no sense to have it on and we continue it to October 1st. But the ball is basically in Burton's court right now.
I so enjoy listening to the other things
Should
that
feel
get
better
brought
about
to the
yours.
table. It's kind of fun.
All right.
All right, that's all I have.
I guess, any other questions?
Not on this, but the A&R that you reviewed earlier is his, and I believe Jeff is probably here for that, right?
I am.
So if we could just give it to him and they could look at it for a minute.
Okay.
That'd be great. Recommend a continuance to the 17th.
Take the public hearing on Ponican Hill Estate and continue it to September 17th.
So
All in
moved.
favor?
Second.
The
Aye.
A&R for a second. And if we could take a moment, Mr. Chairman, before we go on to Dave's hearing. We signed earlier the A&R because it was just a walk-in.
Yep.
And I know Jeff is here. I explained what you're doing with the 3 lots. I explained the conservation easement for the tree, and again, as Jeff and I spoke the other day, this type of easement is not a public access easement at all. The lawyers will make it clear in the deed that it's strictly to allow the assigned conservation person from the town, which will be Todd, to be able to get in there and check the tree when necessary. And You can take the Mylar this evening. There it is. And then, the only other thing I wanted to bring up is, the board received this evening an email from the town administrator about the schedule for the town meeting in the fall. The selectmen opened the agenda, the warrant submittal. The selectmen opened the warrant last night, and you've got only 2 weeks to submit a warrant request, requesting the town to accept the conservation easement for the trees. So, in the next couple of weeks, you or Mrs. Nyland should get that request in to get on the warrant.
Okay.
I would contact Mary Devlin in the selectmen's office about that.
She'll give me the info what we need to do. For
Yeah,
that.
I think all you're gonna need is a simple letter, but just give her a call to confirm whether she is that or not. Reserve a place on the warrant, literally, for the town to authorize acceptance of the conservation easement after the town meeting brings them.
Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
Have a good evening, everyone.
The solar will be quick.
Yeah. It's just a continuance, we're not doing public.
Yeah. We're continuing and wrapping up. As I emailed with Dave today, we're done on the Barrigo 29 Oxford Road one. If I can give the board and just quickly summarize the final Graves review.
Yep.
5 in that direction. You have your copy, I can see. Can you hand this to Ross? Thank you.
Thank you.
There were a handful of items left, and Dave Albert from Barrigo in his latest revision has addressed all of them. You know, hydrology, a couple of questions about HydroCAD details, some pipe outlets and stuff. There are only 2 very, very minor items that are literally adjusting footnote references. Item 14 and item 16. And Mike Andre confirmed to me that that's the type of thing that you would just give us in your final copies of plans prior to issuance of a building permit, sheets that address items 14 and 16, adding that information.
Right, yeah.
So what I'd recommend, Mr. Chairman, is that the board vote to close the hearing, and then I can present the draft conditions for approval vote this evening.
I have a motion to close the public hearing for 29 Oxford Road.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Can we go over the conditions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. They're all standard to the previous site plan, solar projects we've done, and some of them are routine for every site plan, and nothing we haven't gone over before. The first one is the standard 2-year approval, which means that within 2 years of the approval, the applicant has to apply and receive for the building permit. That, in all projects, to make sure that projects just don't go on a shelf after going through this lengthy process. The second one is, prior to the issuance of the building permit, the applicant will have an on-site pre-construction meeting with Graves Engineering, and then I'll issue a written notice to proceed as we do, and that will authorize the building commissioner to issue the building permit. The third one is, when we put this in at the request of the building commissioner, that when he issues the certificate of occupancy or certificate of operation, in this case, after it's complete, the planning board staffer, myself, will initial and sign off, and that way we're authorizing that Graves went out and did a final review, and we're letting the building commissioner know that. The fourth condition is attaching the final Graves report for information purposes, and noting that those condition comments number 14 and 16 will be added for information purposes to the final plans you give us. The fifth one is that the applicant will comply with the site plan construction field inspection schedule that Graves will provide you at the pre-construction meeting. The sixth one is, no later than 30 days from this decision, Barrigo will give us a Mylar and 12 paper copies, and we distribute them to other boards and departments with a cover letter that says this is the final version. Any previous ones they have, they can dispose of.
Okay.
And in that version, you'd give us those 2, 14
Changes,
and 16 changes. The seventh condition is, prior to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy or operation, The revegetation on sheet C-4.0 will be complete, and Graves will do an inspection. Where they propose revegetating around the periphery, it'll be installed and such. The eighth one is if the ground-mounted solar array is not operated for a continuous period of 12 months, it'll be considered abandoned, and the owner will receive a notice from the planning board requesting that they start to initiate within 90 days deconstruction of it. And that goes back to our discussion a few years ago when we first started getting solar, that many communities are requiring that through their planning boards in case there was ever a future abandonment of these types of facilities, which we don't foresee, but it's always good to have that in place. And the next and final condition relates to the policy that you talked about a few years ago and you're implementing for these projects, unless they're in an industrial zone, that the applicant will provide a surety guarantee prior to the certificate of operation in an amount equal to the cost of removal of the ground-mounted solar array if it's abandoned. And we talked about that. What most companies are doing is providing what we get for our cell towers, an insurance policy. And the amount can be proposed by you. What many planning boards are doing is they're understanding that there is a high value in the material for removal, so the value of that is subtracted from the amount for the coverage. Otherwise it would just be double coverage, so to speak. And we can show and provide to the applicant samples of the various insurance companies that other applicants have been using, both solar and cell towers.
Excellent.
So
Is
that's
that
basically
something that gets renewed, or do we get a renewal letter every year or every other year from the
We
insurance company?
we do them according to the insurance company, and Jane and I spend a lot of time on those actually.
Right.
Some insurance companies like to do it annually. Others want a multiple one with a rider of an increase. Traditionally, the insurance companies for any of these removals of infrastructure, whether it's cell towers, wind towers, solar facilities, the industry standard is a 3% evaluation increase. So if it's an annual coming back to the board, it'll increase. If it's, we even have a 5-year one on a solar one that's every 5 years. That 3% is built into the 5-year one, 15% literally over time automatically. So they differ case to case on the actual schematics of it.
Do you have a motion to accept the 9 conditions that would go along with the Oxford Road, 29 Oxford Road project?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. How does it work with Graves during pre-construction and during construction as far as how does he get paid? Is that?
Oh, good question. The way it'll work is similar to the exact same thing through the peer review for the review. Graves bills us about every 6 weeks. We pay out of the planning board's revolving fund, and just as we pay, we bill you to reimburse us. There's a 30-day reimbursal period after which fines kick in if they're overdue. And it's been very fair and reasonable. It's worked that way for about 15 years with the planning board. So I'll get the same types of bills that you've been getting so far and forwarded to you in the same manner.
Is there? Do you have an estimate of how much that might be, or what have you seen in the past?
No idea. It really depends on whether everything's going okay in the field. I really don't have an idea. It's roughly the same level of bills you've been getting all along in terms of dollar amounts.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. All right. Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.
Good luck. Get you your permit in the near future.
Wonderful.
Me, right?
Oh, you're all that's left.
What's everybody doing?
I don't know if we've met on those board members.
I have my Cleveland.
Ross, let me nice to meet you, please.
Do you want to summarize? You want me to summarize? You can do it. It's your permit.
This is a permit for Dresser Hill, and I left you a voicemail on this today, Alan.
Yes.
I thought that the Natural Heritage people wanted to have you guys sign off on it. What they really wanted the address for was so that you'd be aware of it.
Well, that's not exactly accurate, because I
Okay.
spoke with them the other
Oh,
day.
go ahead.
Yeah. Why don't you explain what it is, and then I'll explain what Division of Fisheries is asking the board to do this evening.
Okay. This is a permit. I have a rare species called a marbled salamander that exists. The testing, it has to be done at a certain time of year. You have to bury buckets in the ground, and if the thing falls in it, you have a marbled salamander, and you have fencing that has to go up, and you can't touch. I think the site is like 16 acres. Out of that, 11 of it is conservation. Yeah, so it's difficult to actually get these through. It takes a long time, but this permit has finally come through. The select board signed off on it last night in Charlton here, and I just came from conservation there. They endorsed it a little while ago, so that's pretty much what it is.
How did you find out you had this precious trout on your, or this?
When you file for a conservation, there's a box that you have to check that says that you have a species that could be on the site, and there's maps that they put out that they tell you that there could be a species there. So we went out and we checked off that box, and they forced us to do a test. I mean, when I tell you the test was $30,000.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, the guy practically slept there. So it was. I did it this back, I think, in 2007 or 8 or something to that effect. But we've, market being what it is, we kind of put it on the shelf for a while. And now that it's back, 9 lots on that, and it's been reduced to 7. I think inside of this, there's a picture of the very back page of what I have. There's a new picture of what the new.
Those two.
The new, we're gonna bring in an A&R plan, we haven't done it yet,
Right.
but these lots are much better than those.
What I was going to bring up regarding your message, this is pretty rare for a project to have to go to this level of a detailed environmental protection permit. I've been a planner for 32 years and I've never seen one. You've won the lottery having to go this far. And so I called the staff at Division of Fisheries and said, wow, does he really need this? I mean, this is a 1 in 10,000 type of level of permit. And they said, yeah, it's rare for us too, because you just hit that level of sensitivity with a rare species. So initially they did tell us what we believed, that they were looking for physical sign-off from Conservation, Selectmen, and Planning Board to actually sign it. The woman I spoke to actually said, I'll call you back because I'm not seeing a signature block for the Planning Board. So she called me back the other day and she said, what we're looking for actually, she said she talked to her supervisor, is for the Planning Board to vote this evening and issue a letter. And that the letter would say that we reviewed it with you, the board received copies of this, and that the board is endorsing and supporting the issuance of the permit. So what I'd recommend to the board after discussion tonight is to vote to authorize the chairman to send you that letter with the permit attached that you will be able to document to Division of Fisheries a while later.
That'd be wonderful.
So you're downsizing it to 7 lots?
Yes, it's the same acreage, but as you can see, those lots there, I mean, back in the time when sales were a little bit more abundant than they are today, lots like that probably would have sold, but as it stands today, if you can't have nice separation and.
So you made what, lot number 4 bigger?
Well, basically, we eliminated 2 of the lots that were, and
Oddly shaped.
if you see lots 8 and 9, we pretty much, and 7, we pretty much taken 7 and made that one a big lot, and that's gonna use the driveway easement. And then, now this would be lot 6, but if you see, it gets its frontage from the street that's actually, I think that part of that street's in Dudley. Am I not mistaken, or maybe no, that's past it. But it gets its frontage from the street here and from the actual cul-de-sac itself. It's lot number 5 on yours.
Yeah.
So that's where this area over here is where, and then we just took the rest of it and just separated the frontage out and kind of fanned it out and made them nicer lots.
So to get to lot 7, you go through an existing driveway easement?
Correct.
On number 4?
Correct.
Okay.
That used to service 2 lots, now it only services 1.
Is this open space all conservation land or
Yes.
are you just gonna leave it open because you just are nice like that?
No, we actually had to give money to the Greater Worcester Land Trust, the Charlton Heritage Preservation.
Yeah, the Greater Worcester Land Trust is the particular environmental nonprofit that he's working with that will manage that particular one.
Okay.
Yep.
So is that where your little salamanders are living?
Right there, yeah. I find a little bit funny about the endangered species. Marble salamanders are abundant in Virginia, but they only migrate this far. So because there's only a few of them up our way, they consider them endangered in Massachusetts. I believe I looked at it that way. So it's really, you know, I really don't really understand it. But I must say that the natural heritage people were very good to work with.
And they chose
worked
your
with-
property.
Well, the marble said they just seemed to like it there, and that's what they ended up.
They better stay there now.
Yeah.
I guess the good news is you'll never get solar panels in any of this conservation land.
I know.
I do have a question on page 2. The permit says that you're providing a $45,000 escrow account for managing the salamander and the habitat?
We're paying that blood money to Natural Heritage. We have to pay them. It was $5,000 per lot when there were 9 lots, but now it's what, $6,000 or $7,000 per lot, and that's part of that goes into studying and making sure that the marble salamander can stay in Massachusetts.
How many other subdivisions, not that this has anything to do with this, but how many other subdivisions have you put up, Mr. Blair,
Oh,
in your career?
tenure? 25 maybe?
Have you ever run into any conservation issues such as this before?
On 2 other sites, I had a 4-toed salamander, and my father said he's going to make that a Chinese delicacy so that they'll wipe them out and there won't be any more of them. But that was a joke. Sorry. The fact is that they actually delisted that.
Okay.
So that it came off of the site, and they, and then I had a wood turtle that was, or some sort of a turtle on one other site, and they delisted that. What happened is that there's so many of them.
When you were a kid and I worked with your father when I was the Holden planner, there was a Cambridge, Massachusetts developer who wanted to put up about 60 homes in Holden, and they ran into the red-spotted turtle, and it wiped out 2/3 of the proposed project. It went down to about 19 or so houses. And when we took it out.
Really?
That was the only other one that I ever saw that drastic. That was around the late 1980s.
Now, is there a difference between the spotted salamander and the marble?
Of course, one's
Four-toed
spotted, one's
salamander
marbled.
actually has 4 toes. The
Okay.
marble salmon, actually, I mean, I saw pictures of it. It's actually a pretty salmon, colorful salmon
You
inside.
mean, after spending all this money, you didn't get to shake its hand?
No, I caught it in a bucket a bunch of times, but I didn't get to shake its hand.
Wow.
You know, it's you quite a bit of money for this.
It's now in family albums and stuff.
Yeah, to jump over and roll over and everything else for you.
You're not kidding.
So he's asking us tonight to acknowledge the
Yes.
of the conditions of the conservation.
Right, to support and endorse is the phrase that the state staffer I spoke to recommended, and we could do a cover letter from the chair to Mr. Blair, and he can document that to the state.
We need a vote to
Yes.
the letter.
So do I have a motion to endorse and conservation permit that's requested of this project?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And we'll submit the A&R in the near future.
It'll be in the next few weeks, I think. So, well, we got a little more work to do before we get back with that on Lamb's Pond.
One last question on behalf of the board. In this current building season, are you starting to the road, or are you gonna wait till next season? It's up to
Probably
you.
next season.
Okay. Just wondering.
The
Spring is
little
the biggest.
salamander's gonna have little name tags.
Yeah. They're gonna be on display.
Yes.
A little tracker.
Yeah.
GPS is.
They should have little crowns for what they're crossing.
Talk about Lamb's Pond for a moment?
Sure, yeah, I'm prepared, so.
I was up at Lamb's Pond today and I saw some good progress, but time goes by very quickly, and we're hoping that we can take all the steps with you to finish the road and get it approved. We learned this evening in an email from the town administrator, the selectmen set the town meeting for the 3rd week in October. I think it's that Tuesday.
Third week in October?
What's the third Tuesday? You can flip. October 21st, yep. So, you only have 2 weeks to get a request in. So if in the next 2 weeks, sooner than later, you could contact Mary Devlin in the Selectman's office to put in a request, a warrant placement. But also, Mike Andrade asked me today if I could just convey to you, could you, as soon as possible, at least get a draft as-built plan in paralleling while you finish the final road pavement? What I saw today, I was very impressed with, an excellent job of granite installation. If you could just tell the board your idea for moving forward in the short period of time we have on finishing what you thought your milestones are gonna be.
The toughest part that we had was getting the guy there for the granite, and that's what took so long. And now the granite's all in, and the paving goes right behind that. So the paving guy was on a floater, and this is of course the busiest time of the year for pavers. So he promised us that before the end of next week, he will have it paved. So the finish coat will be on it. At the same time, my engineers are going out there starting either tomorrow or Friday. They're only going to take them a couple of days in the field to pick it up, and a couple of days in the office. So by the end of next week, you'll have the as-bills as well. So then the fence has to go around the retention pond if it's not already done. We hired the guy, and the signage has all been purchased. It's in the office, so we just have to put it up, and we're done.
Signage as in street signs?
No, the open space, it shows where the open space is and things like that. Alan went out and Mike, they went over with us where it was, and we got it all.
I noticed Monday that they were putting the curbing off of 31, the granite curbing.
The roundings are in, and all in the back of the cul-de-sac, it's all done too. Nice.
We discussed also from our field meeting, what the gentleman did within the drainage easement. How's that going on restoring it?
We're getting there. We're getting there. He didn't really realize what he was doing, so we're going to put it back to the way it was supposed to be. The one thing I just want to ask, do you ask the select board to actually lay out the roads? Is that how you?
Yeah, the way it works under state and local regulation is the selectmen will work with you on scheduling a layout hearing. So again, Mary Devlin is your point of contact, both to get on the warrant and to whatever she needs from you in the way of paperwork to assist her in scheduling a public hearing on the layout. The planning board makes a written recommendation to that layout hearing, and it's really based on Graves giving us a review of both the as-built plan and where you are in the field. So, again, we're getting into crunch time because we literally have about 6 weeks to get to town meeting. And if you can keep this moving week to week, she'll need to schedule that layout hearing sometime prior to that town meeting, probably a week or two before.
Now, do they, in Charlton, because many towns do it differently, do they actually take an easement over the roads, or do they actually take the roads right to the feed?
I can't recall that. I really can't recall how that works. Mike Andrade knows that. He handles that for us.
Okay.
So as you continue to work with Mike, just ask Mike that question and then go with whatever direction of the two he tells you we do. You're right. If you look at Massachusetts around the state, half of them do it one way and half of them the other.
Yeah, so it's tough to, and George would need to know that, because, and do they need a meets and bounds description, or is it?
Yeah.
It's a meets and bounds, so it's from this point to that point?
Yeah,
Okay.
legal description with meets and bounds.
Meets and bounds, okay.
Thank you.
And that's about it, that's where I'm at.
Thanks.
Any questions as far as that goes?
I appreciate, because a couple of abutters had wandered in, wondering when it would be accepted, and they were very happy we were heading to fall town meeting.
Me too. Look forward to not having to plow it this year.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yes.
Anything else, Claire?
No, I'm good on my end.
Good.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Good to see you.
We'll get you that letter in the next few days.
I appreciate it, thank you.
Nice meeting you.
Nice to meet you.
We got Jennings Road. Russ Jennings has submitted his request for his annual approval extension for Jennings Road Extension subdivision, and the annual approval extension would be to September 15th, 2015.
You just put in, which is.
Oh, yes.
It's from Rush Jennings, it's in regards to the planning board. We would like would like to be placed on your next agenda, next meeting, to get an extension for Jennings Road Extended subdivision. This would be the project they're doing up off of Osgood, right?
Yes.
Brookfield Road.
It's Jennings Road
Brookfield.
extension.
Well, yeah, Brookfield, yeah. Osgood, Brookfield
Yeah.
area, but it's
I'm
over
looking at
Brookfield.
Ross.
Do I have a motion to give them another one-year extension for Jennings Road?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have four quick items under growth management. The first is just to provide the board to take home this evening to review as an agenda item at your next meeting, a draft set of your annual work goals. And what the board does, Ross, you're new to the board.
Yep.
Every September, October, the board sets as a template a set of goals and objectives. Some of them are site-specific on project management and permit management. Others are more comprehensive planning oriented. And also, the board acknowledges that during the year, things will come up that you have no idea, that you can't predict right now, in the way of a need to work on an item or a project or other sites. So it's a guide and a template, and as we do every year, I'd recommend that at the next meeting, the board look at it and we finalize it and consider it as a guide for the upcoming year. I'll point out one or two quick things. Comprehensive planning has been adjusted to, reflect a couple of the projects we're working on right now, obviously, and heading into, such as the Village District project and a couple of the affordable housing long-range planning projects. Under item 8, where we list a lot of the large-scale projects that are under design, permitting, or field management, that's been updated on a lot of items. And we're getting so many alternative energy projects that that's a subcategory under item 8 too. Both the ones you've approved and others that we know are coming in the near future.
Are Lamb's Farm Estates and Lamb's Pond Estates built by the same individual?
No, Lamb's Pond is Clee, who was here this evening, and Lamb's Farm is the Kozowski brothers. That's their project.
There's probably 5 houses on it right at the moment.
I'm just wondering how two completely different projects ended up with the same name.
Just read the police department.
Yeah, they each came up with that for the name of the subdivision, but the street names are completely different.
Okay.
It was just both from the heritage of the neighborhood. One is on Lamb's Pond, and the other one is on Lamb's Farm. So it's more of a marketing thing for sales as they developed it, and the name of the subdivision officially, the sign will be taken down when they're done, and there'll just be street signs that don't conflict.
For a small town, you
Exa-
actually
that's
have a lot
exactly
going
right.
on,
Yeah.
for a little old shop and a
People don't realize that because we're the 7th largest town square mileage wise in the whole state, so it's more spread out. But if you look at the amount of development, it is very, very active.
How many houses were put up last year?
For calendar year 2012, it was down to about 12 new homes. In calendar year 2013, it went up to 50,
Okay.
the recovery. And I don't have an exact number for 2014, but it's on target from everything Nancy and Kurt have told me to be at least the same, if not a little more. And we can see that from people who come into you for common driveway permits, A&Rs, and dusting off reduced frontage proposals too.
This project R.H. White's got going on Tucker Farm Estates. That's mostly now off of Stafford Street, ain't it?
Yes, Smith Road, you go off of Stafford Street. Actually, in about a month, that'll be up for its annual, and David White comes in every year and touch bases with you on that. And last year he told us that, he's taking it year to year as the economy comes back and hoping to get it going. I thought 2 years ago they were gonna get a first phase in and get a few houses going, but he, at the last minute, decided not to.
So you want us to look at these and just have questions about them, or?
Yes, and any questions, and at your next meeting, you'd vote to finalize it as just a working reference for annual guiding you in working goals and objectives. The second of the 4 growth management items is, just wanted to provide the board, we talked a few meetings ago about receiving from Central Mass Regional Planning the Village Center bicycle and pedestrian count that they did. And we can use that this fall when we do the Village Center project as a data reference. And if I could just comment, there's a cover letter here from Nick Burnham, the Assistant Transportation Planner at CMRPC, who did the counts. If you flip to page 2, it's right at the center where Masonic Home Road, North Main come together, right by the plaza. And he noted some non-compliant ADA ramps and some observation areas and crosswalks and sidewalks. And then if you flip to the 3rd page, you get an idea of the counts that they did. Thursday, June 12th, Monday, June 2nd, and Saturday, June 7th. And you can see that they're fairly low level, which is expected as a baseline for now. But obviously on Saturday, there was a lot more activity than the 2 weekdays, which makes sense, people walking and bicycling through when they're home for the weekend. And then the last page is just a traffic engineering schematic on turning movement for the intersection.
The call for others, just for curiosity.
Excuse me?
Horses maybe? Horses?
Well,
Bicyclists, pedestrians, and then others. I'm just curious what others mean.
We'll have to ask.
Skateboarders maybe?
We'll have to ask him. I have no idea. It could be, like you said, it could be a horse, it could be a scooter, I don't know. That's a very good question. Because it only popped up on Saturday. It didn't pop up during the week at all.
There is a bus that goes through town now.
yeah, it is, but I don't know if it runs on Saturday.
And I don't think, it's supposed to be non-vehicular, so I'm wondering if it's,
Just students.
Mix
kids.
of skateboarders and horses and.
and scooters or something. I'll give him a call and ask him what happened on that Saturday with getting some others counted. That's interesting. Didn't even notice that. Again, it's low level, but it's a good baseline as we move into the village project to have this data.
We need to bring more into the village to make more people walk down there.
Yep.
Somebody's going to buy his kettle corn.
Yeah. That could be it.
Saturday's kettle corn sale.
It is.
I noticed Thursday's observations on June 12th don't go beyond 8:45 a.m. It's an interesting, and on Monday, they don't go before 4 p.m. So
Yeah,
they
he picked
really-
one day for the early morning commute, one day for the evening return commute, and then a midday for the Saturday. You're right.
It's interesting.
There must be logic behind it. There
Yeah.
must be some
Yeah, 'cause
statistical.
You're not capturing your after-dinner runners, you're not capturing your early morning runners, because that's where it just doesn't seem very...
Yeah. I can follow up with him and ask these
That
questions
could
if
be
you
my
like.
elderly on their scooters.
Do they have scooters?
The wheelchair, the motorized wheelchairs.
Could be.
Hey, no, oh yeah, no motors, lady.
Especially if it's on a weekend. See, I don't know.
That was Gertrude right there, man. You even don't need.
Oh, here it is. If you look at the data collection sheet, others are skateboarders and rollerbladers.
Okay.
So it is
And other.
skateboarders and rollerbladers.
It
Look
says
at that.
skateboarders, rollerbladers, other.
Yeah.
Well, just as I got here, I pulled in a parking lot with a couple of kids with their skateboards.
Yes.
And somebody with a camera filming them sliding off the library.
Yes.
Well, Peter, don't you know now that unless it's caught on tape, it didn't actually happen?
Correct.
The third item under growth management is just a reminder that we kick off the Village Center study on your next agenda. Eric Smith will be in, and it's more of an orientation for you on an explanation of how the project will proceed. I've been working with him from the spring through the summer into now on giving him data, walking and analyzing and such. And I've also been reaching out to the 4 major property owners that he'll bring in maps for us to look at. And I've spoken to them about the October session, which will be more of a public participation session. I've spoken to the Millers, I've spoken to Mr. LeBlanc. I spoke to Diane Dombrowski during the summer, and I'll follow up with her between now and the October meeting. And I had an excellent meeting with George Senerth to bring them in on the remaining overlook property related to the project. So they'll participate and show up at the October 2nd workshop session. But again, 2 weeks from tonight is more of a routine agenda item, and you've invited in the EDC if they'd like to join you for that item too. Fourth and final item is regarding our Housing Authority long-term comprehensive planning effort on family housing. As I mentioned to a few board members prior to tonight, I had an excellent working meeting with Bill Scanlon, our consultant, Mike Andrade, our engineer, last Friday, and also John LaFleche, because the 6 parcels you look at with Bill Scanlon, the one that has the most logic and positive elements for moving into a grant application at DHCD to do a general engineering analysis of the parcel is the parcel across from Bay Path. The other ones drop away in terms of either environmental constraints, such as the one across the street, distance away from the center of town, or smack in the middle of a traditional IG zone. You want to be in an industrial park. So the idea is looking for authorization tonight that you would authorize us to do 2 things. Prepare that grant application, but John LaFleche has invited us to meet with the subcommittee of his board of trustees, the building subcommittee, and it's the night that you're going to the all boards and commissions meeting. Bill Scanlon and myself will go to their meeting and request that we move forward. It's an excellent information source if we get the grant approval to analyze the site both generically and for some potential housing on part of the site. And it'll provide some good information to the regional VOCED people, the Housing Authority, to see what the site we think of in the future, and the planning board. And as we explained to John, there is no commitment at this stage for them or any other parcel you look at to definitely do anything. We're just analyzing, exploring, and doing long-range planning to see where things lead. So, I guess all I'm looking for is that if the Bay Path Committee is comfortable, we bring it back to the planning board and we just move forward on a grant application. But on a parallel track, Bill and I can start preparing it because it's pretty routine in what we have to do.
Do we vote on that, or?
You could vote or just agree. I mean, it's not anything formal, because
Right.
you would get once Bill and I prepare the application, it would be on your agenda for you to review, ask questions, and you finalize it and you vote to submit it. So right now it's just giving us the work direction to get going on some preparation for you.
It's a great opportunity to get something.
Yeah.
Be a $25,000 grant request. Engineering, topo analysis,
Make sure what we're
feasibility, yeah, that type of thing. Correct? Those are the growth management items, thank you. Again, the meeting.
We just got the meeting minutes? We have the minutes.
Sure, and I can do these after that.
We've got 3 sets of minutes to go over, one for August 13th, one for August 6th, and one for July 23rd. You can take a few minutes, go over them briefly, if there's something you should add or subtract from. see the Revo farm is going to town up there.
Yeah, I was up there today. It's amazing how quickly they're moving forward.
Road cut in and.
Yeah. They want to be up and running by winter time.
Really?
Yeah. I couldn't do it, but boy, they're trying. Oh.
Well, it's going to be a steel prefab building anyways.
Yeah.
Once you put the foundation in, it's
Yeah, erects that, right?
yeah, erect this up going in.
Yeah, yeah. Just a big one.
I make a motion to accept the July 23rd as presented.
Second.
Meeting, the
All in favor?
minutes.
Aye.
Aye. First, I think.
Do I have a motion for the August sixth?
No, I wasn't here.
Okay. Do I have a
So
motion for
moved.
the August sixth?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I
And,
abstain.
I have a quick change for August 13th.
yep,
This, on the 7:15, the Lynch Home Daycare thing, Kevin Warren is the landowner and not, it says in engineering, Mr. Kevin Warren. I think, I'm pretty sure that Kevin Warren is the landowner. Am I?
He
was.
prepared the plan though.
Oh, so he's the engineer, so that's fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's also the engineer. He's a boyfriend, basically.
do I have a motion to accept the August 13th, 2014 minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Abstain.
That's those
I
three then.
apologize for missing a couple meetings there.
Just got a few items.
Couple more items and you wanna close it out or?
We're good. I can just go with them right now. A few of my items came up in the course of the meeting, so we've covered 4 or 5 already. I just want to give you 2 handouts. One, Sarah Whiting provided to me today a summary of her past week's work in the field as your peer review engineer over at the solar flare site on that drainage item next to the Wolfenden property. And we're in really good shape. She summarized the past week chronologically, and what they've done is, to summarize very briefly, they put in an earthen berm and covered it with a geotextile material that held up very, very well in the monsoon we had the other day. And there's some photos that are attached to it. So, in a nutshell, what she's recommending, you need another one, Ross?
If you could, that'd be great.
What she's recommending is that we just wait through one more rainy, significant storm before you consider releasing the performance guarantee. They also replaced some dead or dying arborvitae with 3 new arborvitae. So they're doing very well over there, and I've been out there a few times myself lately as a non-engineer, just checking it from what we worked on together, and it looks good. And Todd from Conservation has been out, so we've all as a team kept an eye on it. I think we're just about resolved.
It's amazing. I drive by this thing every day. I never stop. But meanwhile, I go everywhere else in town to drive the site.
Well, just a confirmation, I have to RSVP on the all boards meeting of who will speak. Are you gonna do the summary, the brief summary for the
Yes.
board? Okay. I'll just let Mary Devlin know.
Give me some agenda.
Sure, I can give you the notes, no problem. We covered most of my items, I just have 1 or 2 more. Graves just updated their spreadsheet we receive every few months on project status, and I just handed out to the board. One for Ross and Alicia in this direction, each of them, and the rest will go around to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, thank you. Just again to touch base and confirm on the schedule. For the village project, we have 3 meetings for the life of the project. The first one is our orientation on September 17th, and then the second planning board meeting on October 15th. We'll clear the agenda as much as possible for more of the public participation and inviting in residents and property owners from the village district itself. And then the final meeting, which will be more of a draft presentation from CMRPC of everything we've been working on, would be the December 3rd or December 10th. We'll just keep it in mind as we move forward.
Did we do a little whatever, something for the newspapers, so any other town folk that might want to show up?
Yes,
to that
we'll
meeting?
do that for the October 15th meeting. Absolutely, we've talked about that. Yep, some outreach and some media updating to get the word out. because we did that when we created the village district originally, and it worked very well to get some participation. I'll be careful because I respect that we're on cable TV, and an applicant wanted me to just touch base with you on something, but not to get too specific on his plans before he submits. There is a gentleman who is looking into creating a small used car dealership via site plan on Route 20, and I met with him today. And he's gonna hire an engineer and come in for an existing site, but he just doesn't want it publicized. So if we hadn't been cable tonight, he authorized me to give you more detail, but if, you know, as he negotiates his lease with an option to buy the site, he just doesn't want it to get out there. So this is as far as I'll go this evening, just to let you know it's on the radar. Thank you. There's still a few solar projects in the pipeline. We have the two that you're aware of, we talked about before, that are being worked on for submittal. And I had a call yesterday from a very reputable company that is looking at another one. So they're still out there, they're still moving along, and we still have that happening as a pattern in town. Just a reminder, at your October 1st meeting, you've got your 2 zoning hearings scheduled. Cheryl and Bruce McKissick's zoning map amendment and the par 3 and miniature golf in IG zones on land use table amendment. So both of those are for 2 meetings out on October 1st. And last but hardly least, I gave some information and some contact information to Eric Smith, the planner who you'll be working with on the Village District, on a different item from Central Mass. They're working with CSX, the rail terminal in Worcester, and initially they had sent out an email looking for other freight or rail locations in Central Mass, but beyond that, they then had Eric contact planners in the area, and he called me last week. Separate from that, they're also looking for possibly a site of 25 acres or more that would be a truck terminal connected into the CSX facility. So in one of the suburbs, off of a major highway location, they'd have a truck terminal that would do trucking back and forth into the Worcester CSX rail facility. So I provided him with the information from our large properties that we have available along Route 20 and connected him with the various people we're dealing with. And it is a long shot. He made it clear that it's not moving forward quickly. Over the next several months, Central Mass is compiling an inventory listing to provide CSX. And then at this stage, at least, they're only looking, what he's telling me, of one potential location, and they will receive a very extensive list from him. But it will be interesting to see where it goes, and we'll have provided that resource for Charlton, and maybe it'll be us now or in the future. Very interesting.
Are you looking for something next to a train track?
No, initially they did make a request on that not too long ago for something rail-related outside of Worcester, but this came along after that. This is the idea of a truck terminal that would do trucking in and out of the Worcester area, but be located in the suburbs. Kind of intermodal is the phrase they use, a truck rail type of network between city and suburb. Interesting, as they expand and try to provide services. I think what is a key for Charlton, if they did want something, is our location in the southern New England, highway network between the Pike and, Sturbridge exit and all that good stuff. And those are my items for this evening. Oh, just one more. There is an engineer who's working with me and Mike Andrade. You approved for Thaddeus Scotta the St. Mary's Way subdivision, and that was on private water on site. But now the engineer's been asked by Thaddeus to design a water main and look into tying into town water. So if they do proceed beyond just designing it and seeing what they think of it, it would come back to you for a public hearing and a revision. So, interesting. Thank you.
Close the meeting.
Sounds good.
That concludes the scheduled agenda items portions of this meeting. We're all set.